Methodology of Humanities, Module 3, Narration and Representation. Narration in History. History is the representation of the past, which is recorded by historians in the form of historical narratives. In the past, the oral culture promoted folk tales and folk songs to speak about old tradition in addition to the past history handed down to the generations in all communities. We have in Kerala the northern ballads, story poems which tell our local history. It was only by the with the coming of printing technology, printing press, that the concept of written history got its existence. Each community had its own way of preserving the past through myths, stories, songs, performing arts, and the like. In the Indian culture, our epics like Ramayana and Mahabharata, which were traditionally handed over in the forms of stories, became the main source of reference to our ethnicity and culture. While we look back into our yesterday years, we depend upon our epics as a source to know about our past, even Vedas and Upanishads, and even the stories told by different ethnic groups and communities, Adivasis, their stories, 1,000 Ramayanas, or different versions of the Mahabharata. All these have been read to construct a past, a tradition. The various art forms of Kerala, like Kathakali or Ottantullal, or even the ritual practices, performances like Theyyam, they preserved and also circulated the history of Kerala. We know about our past from the Thotam part of our Theyyams. Later came the print media to preserve the past on papers, and thus entered the role of history and historians. Instead of people telling stories, there became a modern man, a very informed, educated man who is able to read, write, interpret our past. They are called historians. So official histories have begun to be written during the modern period after the invention of the printing press. Narratology has an inevitable role to play in the formation of history today, because history is a written document. So whatever we write will have a story, a plot, a cause and effect relationship, and so narratology has a role in it. The narration of history is significant. Who writes? What is being written? Who are the target readers of that history? And such things arise. History is written through the perspective of a historian. From his angle, he views things that had happened in the past, or the events that are there before him. And it can be differently written by another person of another time, having another perspective. So a single history of an incident or an event, of a place, of a particular time is not possible. People having plural perspectives would construct different histories. As we have different Ramayanas, we have different histories as well. History has, like any other story, different process, and in the construction of history, language or idea, those things are undergoing some kinds of a process of reconstruction, an attempt to gain information about our ancestors. In that attempt to gain information about our ancestors, interpretation of life and experiences at a particular point of time, a kind of reconstruction happens. We don't have everything ready-made within our reach in history. We have to select certain things and omit certain other things to construct history. Only relevant documents will be accepted. There is a process of rejection, collection, rejection, writing, rewriting, editing, etc. There is a process in it. We don't get history as raw as we get it from the public. We cook it. We manufacture a kind of history. We construct a kind of history out of the raw materials that we get. The raw and the cooked, there are differences. History is considered to be realistic in nature, unlike literature, where it is considered to be highly imaginative, where incidents are bound together with the writer's perspectives, preferences, likes and dislikes, and presented in the form of narratives. We think that the historian is impartial. He is not siding with any particular idea or ideology, unlike in the case of an imaginative writer, where he will be sympathizing with some people or some characters of their stories. But historians are expected to be impartial. But it doesn't happen, because everything comes to us in the form of narrative. Both history and literature come to us in the form of narrative. A major source of historical narratives existing in the modern time are books, journals, periodicals, historical monuments, ancient objects and equipments used by the ancestors, excavated fossils, archaeological evidences, etc. We make a kind of history, and we circulate the history through books and journals, periodicals, newspapers, based upon the material that we get from our immediate surroundings. A writer, a poet also does the same. But the writer doesn't have to look into the evidences. He can imaginatively reconstruct the past. But a historian has to depend upon evidences. There should be concrete evidences before him. He has to substantiate his theory. History is, we think, is a real documentation of the past. And it also demands the concept of cause and effect, as explained by the American psychologist Jerome Bruner, logico-scientific mode of thinking. One action leads to another. The cause for the occurrence of an action and the effect caused due to the action that took place. If X, then Y. History is a combination of reason and result, we think. It continues as the speaker links it till it forms a historical narrative. So history, we think, has got some kind of a cause-effect relationship, which we need not have to have in literature. Historical narratives also differ according to the person, culture, period, his region, and the like. The history of India, written by the imperialists, the British people, is totally different from the history that we write, the natives of India write. When the subaltern began to speak, we reconstructed a different history. The British people, they have official history written about India, or they have constructed a history for us. We didn't have a formal history before the coming of the British people, but they wrote Indian history from their perspective to suit their purpose. Now we have begun to rewrite, strike back. In a similar way, it remained a different experience for the Africans when compared to the Indian community. British people, they had constructed a history for the Africans. Africa is named as a dark continent by the Europeans. In their history books, we will come to that kind of a reference. But when we Indians speak about Africa, we will never use that term. So history written about the black people in Africa by the white people in Europe will be highly dangerous, we can say. It is imperialistic in its nature. So there is nothing as neutral history. There is bias, racial prejudice, power, everything in the making of history as well. In India, the effect of colonization was experienced differently by the upper class Brahmin community and the Dalits. The Brahmins were accepting or rejecting colonization because of their own class and caste positions. The Dalit community also had different approaches made to colonization. British people, irrespective of caste, promoted education. In India, the Brahmins denied knowledge to the so-called lower caste people. So, the subalterns, the Dalits, or the underprivileged people of India, they thought that English education was liberating because knowledge was locked before them. Knowledge locked up in Sanskrit language was locked before them. So English could be studied by any person, irrespective of his caste, class, and other differences. History speaks differently about one particular incident when spoken from a variety of hierarchical voices, from plural perspectives, through multiple voices. The manifestation of history is available now. History, as an effective mode of communication, needs effective narrative methods and theories. According to the American theorist of history, Hayden White, there are three major modes of communicating events in the past. One is annals mode of history. Second one is chronicle mode. Third one, historical narrative. In the annals mode, history can be narrated by representing the list of important events that happened in the history of India. For example, the post-independence rules of India, it can be listed down like 1947 India acquired independence. 48 Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated. 49 framing of the constitution. 50 India became a democratic republic. 52 the first national election. 57 Jawaharlal Nehru became the Prime Minister of India for the second time. This annals mode of narration portrays only the skeleton form of history in a chronological order. Things as they have happened in time, in the proper order. There is no central theme or coherence. Only things are told in a sequential manner. They do not give us a detailed description of the incident or event. For conducting quiz programs, we resort to these kinds of annals mode of history and we get a kind of skeleton. the flesh and blood is lost. We get the structure. Some points will be there. We will get some information. In the chronicle mode, in the second mode, the chronicle modes of representation provide us with detailed history while having a central theme or a subject. It is coordinated under one particular group of events and is more orderly in nature. It follows a chronological order of events and also connects each event with the next by giving us a genuine and significant information. The cause-effect relationship would be built in it. In 1947, India acquired its long-cherished independence on 15th August 1947. In the annals mode, we have 1947, India got independence. But in the chronicle mode, we have India acquiring its long-cherished independence in 1947, August 15th. 48, Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated on January 30th, 1948 in New Delhi by an extremist, Nathuram Godse. A detailed description is given. In 49, the country framed its constitution on 26th November. In 50, India became a democratic republic after the constitution came into existence. So there is a relationship between what has happened in 49 and 50. 52, the country held its first national election. 57, the Congress won a sweeping majority and Jawaharlal Nehru began his second term as Prime Minister. First election, second election, Nehru getting re-elected. This kinds of a detailed description could be seen in the chronicle mode. Third one, the historical narrative. The third type of narrative is the historical narrative, which gives a detailed descriptions about the past, explaining cause and effect of each incident without leaving any room for further explanation. A full-fledged history is given. They create a close-knit form of narrative style and bring about a sense of completion. But we know nowadays that no history is complete. There will be gaps, there will be omissions, and there will be silences made by mistake or made intentionally, and we have to read in between lines. We have to rewrite history every time because there are people still hidden from our vision, made invisible. When they come forward, a new history from their perspective will be written. So subaltern historians are there. They dislocate the old traditional type of the narrative of our nation or even world history. The emergence of local history recently also is a kind of rewriting of our history that was written during the days of nationalism or in the days of imperialism. We have different versions of history, different narratives of history from different perspective by different people. In the third mode, we have a kind of narrative like this. India acquired its long-cherished independence on 15th August 1947 after the British government decided to lay down all claims of the Indian dominion. In this wake of post-independence India and its illusion of Swaraj, Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated on January 30th, 1949 in New Delhi by an extremist, Nathuram Godse. The country framed its constitution on 26 November 1949 by a committee headed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. The country held its first national election in 1952 and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru became the Prime Minister for the second time in 1957. So this is the third type of narrative. History of the past reaches the reader's hands in the form of a story with certain characteristics like characters. For example, here Gandhi, Godse, Nehru, Ambedkar, cause-effect sequences of events, election, result, prime ministership of Nehru, etc. Chronological representation of the past. First happened this and then that. We became independent. We constructed our constitution, etc. Then large themes like India, nation, independence, constitution, freedom, liberation. Then description in detail. How did we fight for our freedom? How did they end up their rule? The British people end up their rule in India. How did they pack themselves back? How did Mahatma Gandhi and Nehru worked among the people? How did Ambedkar and his team formulated Indian constitution? These kinds of descriptions in detail could be had in the third mode. Then interpretation of the received information. Gandhi was assassinated by an extremist, Nathuram Godse. It's an interpretation of a received information. Godse was an extremist. Gandhi, our father of our nation. These are all descriptions, interpretations. So history has different methods to narrate past events. The annals mode, the chronicle mode, the historical narrative. Gerard Jennett speaks of 3 levels of narration. One is history. It is defined as story, a set of events or actions that happened in the past and which has to be narrated. 2, recit or narrative. The story is told in the oral or written form. It represents speech or writing by the author through which the story reaches the reader. Recit can also be called text or narrative discourse, written form of history. 3, narrating. The larger process of recounting, retelling produces the recit, the written form. Narration is done by the author or the speaker in the story, the act of producing the text which forms a narrative, the textuality of history. While narrating, the selection, arrangement, ordering, etc. of the event creates a narrative. So there are 3 aspects, 3 levels of narration, 3 elements of story, text and narration. Only these 3 things put together would complete the narrating process in history, according to the French theorist Gerard Jennett.